There was one photograph in particular that made people uncomfortable when they looked at it for too long. It was taken in a crowded square in Prague, sunlight falling across old stone buildings, while tourists walked in every direction. And at first nothing about the picture seemed unusual. The woman who posted it online was smiling in the center of the frame, holding a paper cup of coffee, and the background looked like any other busy travel photo. But near the edge of the image, partially hidden behind a group of strangers, there was a man standing very still. He was not looking at the buildings or the crowds like everyone else. He was looking directly at her. At first it seemed like a coincidence, something easily ignored, but the strange part was that the same man appeared in pictures taken thousands of miles apart, in cities he should never have been able to reach at the exact same moments. When people eventually noticed the pattern, the question was not just who he was, but how long he had been there. Before we start, please subscribe if you haven't already. The woman in the photographs was named Laura Jensen, and before anything strange happened, she was living a very normal life that most people would have described as comfortable and predictable. She was 32 years old. She worked remotely as a graphic designer for a small marketing company, and she had recently decided to spend a year traveling because her job allowed her to work from anywhere with a laptop and stable internet connection. Friends often described her as organized and calm, the kind of person who kept careful travel plans, researched neighborhoods before booking apartments, and woke early in the morning to photograph quiet streets before the crowds arrived. She also had a habit that many travelers shared, which was documenting nearly everything she did. She posted pictures constantly on her public social media page, usually simple moments from the places she visited: cafes, street markets, riverside walks, small museums that most tourists ignored. And because her followers enjoyed the relaxed style of her posts, the account slowly grew into a small travel page that people checked regularly. The first few months of travel were exactly what she had hoped for. She began in Lisbon, then moved on to Barcelona, then spent several weeks in Rome, and during that time, the photos she posted looked exactly like any other traveler's collection of memories. There were bright pictures of food markets, narrow streets, late evening sunsets over water, and occasionally she would ask strangers to take a photo of her standing in front of some old building, so her family could see where she had been. At the time, nothing about the pictures seemed unusual, and if anyone had examined the backgrounds closely, they probably would have noticed nothing more than the typical blur of passing strangers. The first person who noticed something odd was not Laura herself. It was a follower of her page, someone who had been casually looking through older posts while planning their own trip to Italy. That follower sent her a private message one evening, saying that a man in the background of one photo looked strangely similar to someone in another picture from a different country. The message was not written as a serious warning. It sounded more like a small curiosity, the kind of thing people sometimes notice when browsing photos for too long. Laura read the message while sitting in a cafe in Vienna, and she responded with a short laugh, assuming it was just a coincidence caused by tourists wearing similar clothes. Still, out of mild curiosity, she opened the two photos the person mentioned. One had been taken in Barcelona near the harbor. The other had been taken in Rome outside a small bakery. At first, the pictures looked completely unrelated, but when she zoomed in on the background, she noticed a man standing several steps behind her in both images. He was not close to the camera, and in both photos, he looked partially hidden behind other people, but there were details that made the resemblance difficult to ignore. He was tall, his posture straight, and he wore a dark coat even though the weather in Barcelona had been warm. His hair was short and dark, and in both pictures he appeared to be looking in her direction rather than at the surrounding buildings. Laura stared at the two images for several minutes, eventually deciding it was just an illusion created by low resolution and distance. Cities were full of strangers who dressed the same way, and the idea that the exact same person had somehow appeared in two different countries at the exact moment she was photographed seemed too strange to consider seriously. She closed the images and continued working on her laptop, and by the next morning she had already forgotten about it. The situation remained quiet for almost 3 weeks until she traveled to Prague. During that time, she continued posting pictures from Vienna, and then from a short trip to Budapest, and nothing seemed unusual until another follower commented under one of her Prague photos. This time the comment was public, and it simply asked why the same man appeared in several of her pictures. Because the account had grown large enough that followers sometimes joked with each other in the comments, Laura initially assumed it was another coincidence being exaggerated for fun. But when she opened the photo again, the same uncomfortable feeling returned. The Prague image showed her standing in the center of a busy square, holding a coffee cup, while the afternoon crowd moved around her. She had not taken the picture herself. A passerby had offered to snap it while she stood near a statue, and at the time she remembered the moment as completely ordinary. Yet when she zoomed into the far right side of the image, near a group of tourists looking at a map, she saw the same man again. He stood behind the crowd, slightly separated from them, wearing the same dark coat and the same still posture. Unlike the others around him who were talking or walking or looking at their phones, he appeared almost frozen in place. And once again, he was looking directly at her. The realization made Laura uncomfortable in a way she could not explain, but she still told herself there had to be a normal explanation. Europe was full of travelers moving between cities, and maybe he was simply another tourist who happened to follow a similar route. Still, curiosity made her open older photos, and for the first time she began examining the backgrounds carefully instead of focusing on the places she had visited. The deeper she looked, the stranger it became. In a photo from Lisbon taken during her first week of travel, a tall man could be seen near a bus stop in the distance, the details blurred but the posture strangely familiar. In Barcelona, there were 2 different images where someone matching his shape appeared across the street. In Rome, he was standing outside the bakery. In Vienna, he was partially hidden behind a tram stop sign. And in almost every case, the person who looked like him was not interacting with anyone around him. He was simply standing still, watching in the direction of the camera. At first, Laura tried to laugh it off and posted a joking message asking if anyone else could spot the mystery man in her pictures. But the comments quickly turned uneasy rather than playful. People began circling the figure in screenshots and reposting the images side by side, pointing out how similar he looked each time. The more photos they compared, the harder it became to dismiss the pattern. The coat looked identical. The height looked identical. The way he stood with his shoulders square and arms resting at his sides looked identical. And the strangest detail was that his face was never completely clear. It was always just far enough away from the camera, or partially blocked by something, that no one could see him well enough to identify him. Laura stopped joking about it after that. She told herself she was probably letting the internet exaggerate something meaningless, but that night she found it difficult to sleep. Her small rented apartment overlooked a quiet street, and several times she woke during the night after hearing footsteps outside, the slow rhythm of someone walking and stopping again. Each time she looked through the window, she saw nothing except the yellow glow of streetlights and empty pavement. Over the next few days, the feeling of being watched began creeping into her routine. When she worked in cafes, she occasionally noticed a tall figure in dark clothing standing across the street. But when she looked a second time, the person was gone. Once she thought she saw someone similar reflected in the glass of a train window while traveling to another part of the city, but the reflection disappeared before she could turn around. Eventually, the online discussion around her photos became large enough that a few followers began analyzing the timeline more seriously. They compared the dates of her posts with travel schedules between cities, and one of them pointed out something that made the situation far more disturbing than it first appeared. Some of the photos had been taken only hours apart in cities that were hundreds of miles away. One image from Vienna had been posted in the morning showing the man near the tram stop, while another photo from Budapest later that same day appeared to show the same figure standing near the river behind her. Even if someone had been following her travel plans perfectly, there would not have been enough time to move between those places without extraordinary speed. When Laura saw that comparison, she felt a slow, cold fear that she could not easily dismiss. She began thinking about the earliest photo again, the one from Lisbon, and she remembered something she had not considered important before. The day that picture was taken had been the first morning of her trip. She had arrived late the previous night, barely slept, and woken early to explore the neighborhood with her camera. And she also remembered that strange feeling she had while walking through those quiet streets, the sense that someone had been behind her more than once even though she had never turned around to check. That memory stayed with her for the rest of the week, and eventually she decided to take a break from posting photos online. The account went quiet for several days, which was unusual enough that some followers asked if she was still traveling. During that time, she focused on finishing work projects and staying indoors, telling herself that the strange situation would probably fade once the internet stopped examining every image. But something unexpected happened during that quiet period. While organizing files on her laptop, Laura opened a folder containing photos she had never posted online. Most of them were simple practice shots she had taken while adjusting camera settings. Blurry pictures of sidewalks, cafe tables, and random street corners that she never intended anyone else to see. In one of those unused photos taken in Lisbon, she noticed the man standing clearly across the street. Unlike the others, this picture had been taken from closer distance, and although the image was still slightly out of focus, the outline of his face was more visible. His expression was not angry or threatening. It was calm, almost patient, the way someone might look while waiting for a familiar person to arrive. And that was the moment Laura realized something that made her hands shake. The man was not looking at the camera. He was looking directly at her. The discovery left her with a strange sense of dread that followed her through the rest of the evening. And after staring at the image for a long time, she finally closed the laptop and decided she needed to stop thinking about it. She told herself again that coincidences and online speculation had simply grown into something larger than reality. But the next morning, while packing her bag to leave Prague for the next city on her travel list, she noticed something resting against the inside of her apartment door. It was a printed photograph. The paper was slightly creased, as if it had been slipped quietly under the door during the night. When she picked it up, she immediately recognized the image. It was the same Prague photo she had posted online, the one taken in the crowded square with the coffee cup in her hand. Except in this printed version, the background had been circled with a black pen, and next to the circle someone had written a short message in careful handwriting. It simply said that she had been difficult to find again, and that he was glad she had finally started traveling.